Hello, I'm Chris Burns, and welcome to The Network. Hard talk with a matrix of newsmakers. The headlines. As Donald Tusk becomes the new EU Council president, how much power does the former Polish prime minister really have? Or do the top heads of state still call the shots? Is he, as a Russia critic, to balance the softer line on Russia by the new EU foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, who will prevail? As the first council president from the East, how much will he press the interests of his region on cutting CO2 without damaging their economies dependent on coal? How will the balance of power play out between the presidents of the EU Council, Commission, and Parliament? Until Tusk can polish his English, as he says, how much will language be a hindrance, or does it matter? Now, wired into this edition of the network here at the European Parliament in Brussels, Richard Corbett, a British former chief aide to outgoing EU Council President Herman Van Rompuy, and now a member of the European Parliament with the Socialists and Democrats, or S&D. Danuta Hübner, a Polish member of the Parliament and former European Commissioner, who, like Mr. Tusk, is a member of the center-right European People's Party, or EPP. And Paul Ivan, policy analyst at the European Policy Center, or EPC. Question to all of you, starting with Richard. How much power does the president really have, and how much can Mr. Tusk impose his personality and his will on the council?
He has no individual power to take decisions, but he chairs a very powerful meeting. It brings together the top political figure of every member state and the president of the Commission. So if he can cajole them to reach agreement, it has political momentum to carry through the system. The challenge is to get 28 prima donnas around the table to agree.
Danuta, you know Mr. Tusk well. Do you think he can do that?
I think it's not only coordinating and looking for compromises, and here he's absolutely perfect. I think he proved it in Poland, how he can do it. But I think it also depends on the personality, and Mr. Van Rompuy has already left a certain legacy. So I think Mr. Tusk will be able to build on what is left, and will be coming also with initiatives. So I hope he will also understand the importance of working with the European Parliament, will be coming here. And I think that his personal capacities is exactly what is needed here for this institution.
But isn't he just a gatekeeper, Paul? Doesn't it really come down to, at the end of the day, that it's the heads of state in the top capitals of Europe who call the shots?
Well, certainly the heads of states, especially of the biggest member states, will still retain the same power that they currently have. But I would say that the power of Mr. Tusk will consist in the setting of the agenda and in the mediation role that he will have in trying to bring the 28 heads of state and government together.
Okay, let's go to a hard issue, climate change. Mr. Tusk is from a region that really depends a lot on coal more than on others. Do you think he can persuade the council to go easier on the East to save jobs in that region, at least on CO2? Richard.
His job in chairing that meeting is to get consensus. It's not to defend the interest of his country. There is a Polish prime minister around the table to do that. So his job depends crucially on his ability to knock heads together, to persuade, to cajole, to build compromises, to put a text on the table, to adjust it, and get the necessary level of agreement.
To note that we're in the middle of talks on reaching an agreement in Paris next year on climate change. Danuta, do you think there will be a change on the EU policy, being that Tusk is from a country that depends on coal?
I think we have already, as the European Union, adjusted our attitude to the climate change and to the actions that are needed and that must be taken. Here we understand the different situations in individual member states, and I think this kind of flexibility has been open already in the approach of the European Union to the climate change. So I think that we will continue this approach, and hopefully it will be also met and respected by other partners in the world.
Paul, what do you think? I mean, the 2030 targets were actually seen as a shift of power to the council seizing power here. What do you think?
It is not the whole region that has the same profile as Poland has. And as Mr. Corbett said, Mr. Tusk is not there to push forward the interests of Poland, and he will not really be able to do that because he will not be able to push the big member states or some of the other medium-sized or smaller member states to somewhere where they don't want to go.
Okay, how much are we going to see kind of a competition between Mr. Tusk and Federica Mogherini, the foreign policy chief? We do see that the presidential role, as it's spelled out, is to seek consensus and to help to represent foreign and security policy without stepping on the toes of the foreign policy chief. Mr. Tusk being seen as tougher on Russia than Mogherini, who's going to prevail on this, Richard?
Well, the policy positions in both these areas have to be agreed by the member states, so there shouldn't be a big difference between what comes out of the foreign ministers' meeting and what comes out of the prime minister's meeting. But on the relationship between the two, it's no different from what happens at national level between a president and the prime minister on the one hand and their foreign minister on another.
Do you not think that Mr. Tusk is going to try to impose a tougher line on Russia?
Yeah, you forgot about Mr. Juncker. Normally there are these three guys who really fight for this. Tradition was that they look for their position in the foreign policy. But I think here what is now needed, and we all have to look forward, and Madame Mogherini will have to prepare a strategy, a long-term strategy that would take again our relations from this confrontation to the cooperation, maybe not partnership, but cooperation. And I think Mr. Tusk's experience will be extremely helpful because he's also somebody who understands the need of finding a cooperation platform with Russia, even though now we need to be tough and we need to continue with the sanctions.
Tough. On the other hand, could Mr. Tusk be kind of a bridge toward Russia, as Nixon was to China way back?
In 2008, 2009, he did try to improve relations with Poland and with Russia, Poland's relations with Russia, and Poland has made some steps in that direction, but obviously, well, there was a limit until where he could go.
Okay, a question on the structure of the council is that a lot of people, regular Europeans, ask, why do we have so many presidents? And we have a rotating council presidency.
Absolutely.
Should we phase that out now that we have a European Council president?
We have a plethora of presidents. Every institution has its own president. It would have been far better if, at least it works in English anyway, if we'd had a Speaker of the Parliament, a Governor of the Central Bank, a Chairman of the Ordinary Council, a President of the European Council, and a Prime Commissioner. And then people would have understood their roles a little bit better. But no, we call everything president and everyone gets confused.
Then should we get rid of the rotating presidency?
No.
Why?
I think it's very important that people, that citizens of individual member states, that they see also that their prime minister, that their ministers, that they go to Brussels, that they feel responsible for European Union. Rotating presidency is about responsibility for the European Union. That's where we connect with our people, and when people feel that they are part of the Europe that is now run by their government. So I think it's very important that we stick to this.
Okay, but Paul, I mean, don't we have too much overlap here? Don't we have too many chiefs?
Well, indeed, I would say the system is not necessarily very clear for the regular citizens, for the ordinary citizens. At the same time, the rotating presidency is also a way of bringing the EU back to the member states. The EU gains a lot of visibility during the 6 months that the country holds the rotating presidency. So I think that's something that should be kept.
Okay, and a final question. What do you think that we should, and this question comes up every once in a while, should we popularly elect the European Council president? Is it about time we did that as a way to get the voters directly involved in the council? What do you think, Richard?
Well, in most European countries, unlike America, we don't directly elect our governments. We elect parliaments who then choose the majority, determines who is prime minister. And in the European system, we're sort of edging towards something a little bit like that, in that the choice of president of the Commission, the day-to-day executive branch of the European Union, is now increasingly determined by a majority in Parliament as a result of the elections to Parliament, which is what happens in most European countries at national level.
Okay, Danuta, is it about time we elected the Council President?
No, I was very happy with the Spitzencandidate procedure for the European Commission. Finally, we have a Commission which some people say is born in this Parliament, which I think is good for the supervision, for monitoring, for cooperation, for dialogue, and for the efficiency. But on the Council President, I think it's good that somebody that people remember as their own leader at home for many years, and that they remember him well usually, that now he's in charge of Europe. So that builds also confidence. I think we should keep it as it is today.
Paul, last word.
Well, we have to also ask ourselves, are we really ready to give the Council President the power? Because we would give him a lot of legitimacy by directly electing. But can we give legitimacy but not the power that should come with it?
Very good question.
Normally it's the other way around. You give the power, you don't give the legitimacy.
True.
So now at least, yeah.
Thanks to all of you. I'm so sorry we're out of time. I'd like to thank our guests Richard Corbett, Danuta Hübner, and Paul Ivan. I'm Chris Burns, and until next time, thanks for connecting with the network.